So now we move on to our Muppets of the month. And whereas last month was quite a light-hearted Muppet, which
It
led
was a
to a
lovely. You tell everyone what happened subsequently.
well, it led to a wonderful interaction with Neil Ackerman, and hopefully people have seen that interview that we did
About the
about
stone
the
circle that never was.
not so ancient stone circle. Yeah.
Yep.
In this instance, these are Muppets of a much more grim and serious order. Unfortunately, these are various stories. Again, we seem to be lumping stories together because they're thematically very similar. In this segment, these various stories connected with the active, so of course active, but very deliberate and obvious acts of vandalization, if that's a word. People vandalizing key monuments and graves, seemingly around the country. For example, Karl Marx's grave in London has been vandalized recently with red paint, casting aspersions on the guy and talking about all sorts of other elements of his historical impact. We have in recent months and weeks, and seemingly a continuing target for vandalism, is the Bomber Command Memorial in London. You highlighted to me in the past couple of days the Glasgow War Memorial,
The Boer War.
From the Boer War, yeah,
Yeah.
vandalised with a suspected hammer attack, and
Yeah.
it looks like the face, the elbow, the crotch, and the the leg is below the knee, more or less, is missing on this figure in the statue here, and also as well. Unfortunately, a much more recent memorial, Mindless Yob says that the Sun headline here, vandalised 9/11 memorial to Brits in London by hurling white paint over the monument, weeks after war statues were defaced.
Yeah.
This seems to be an unfortunate trend, and it seems to be much more closely connected than perhaps, for example, the coincidence of human remains being handled in the previous stories that we're looking at this month.
Well,
This seems to be an unfortunate maybe attitude shift. I mean, how and who do you think is doing this, and
well,
what does it mean?
it's not fair to speculate that far on this simply because, as far as I'm aware, there haven't been any arrests in any of these cases yet.
No.
And
Oh,
that's
sorry.
the
Oh,
spice of their.
Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill was also splashed with paint
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
Statue of him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think though we can't escape the thought really that the thing that all these disparate sites have in common, Karl Marx in Highgate Cemetery, one of the most famous and listed, highly protected monuments in the country. The Bomber Command, the new Bomber Command Memorial at the top end of Green Park in London, the Boer War Memorial in Glasgow, the 9/11 Memorial outside the old US Embassy, which also includes actually the memorial to the Eagle squadrons, the American flyers who flew with the RAF in World War II. What these things have in common is they're all parts of what, I mean, in the jargon, in the academic jargon, is contested pasts. The Bomber Command is controversial because some people argue that it was a terror organisation and that things like the bombing of Dresden were war crimes. Bombing of Dresden in 1945 was a war crime. The Boer War is an expression of British colonialism to some people, and an oppression of the British as the oppressive imperialist power. Obviously 9/11 is controversial for all sorts of reasons, and we could go on. Now, again, they may be completely unconnected, but you could certainly make a case that they could be attacks on that kind of monument is a physical expression of the kind of culture war that is going on. The Karl Marx attack in particular was making comments about communism and how communism had murdered millions of people and so on. And so you could make a case that was, for example, somebody with, shall we say, slightly right of centre views, wanting to make a point in a way that was very public. And at a time when we're seeing the Gilets Jaunes movement popping up in Britain, supported by the far right, and organisations like Hope Not Hate reporting an increase in far right activity.
Well, and
You could make that kind of connection. People will remember. So I was going to say just one more thing, just very quickly. People may remember as well, controversies like Rhodes Must Fall in Oxford with the statue of Cecil Rhodes. Students asking for that to be removed because it's an expression of imperialism. The argument in the States about the Confederate flag and Confederate generals, statues of Confederate generals. Politics is, the political norms are fraying at the edges, and in the kind of somewhat febrile atmosphere we're in at the moment, you could see why certain people might want to take a hammer to a war memorial to make a point.
You can. I mean, the reason why I should just say you're not just lightly reaching for this notion of the far right. In the case of Karl Marx, people, in order to kind of say, well, the Nazis weren't as bad as,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they highlight Marx as a natural.
Communism killed more people than Hitler did.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And as a natural extension of the far left, as they would characterise it.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why that comes up. And also, as far as Rhodes goes, I think there's a very good argument for him being essentially the architect of a near mechanised massacre of millions of people. But ultimately, it's one of those things where there are ways and means to actually approach these statues, because especially in the case of with Karl Marx's memorial, it's a place of memory. It's a cemetery. It's a place for the dead. In the case of the Bomber Command, that is an act of provocation. You are using it to deliberately annoy other people.
That's the point.
Exactly. That is precisely the point. And there's another interesting instance where there's a statue of Roosevelt and Churchill on a bench together, which was vandalised with white paint. And again, these are it's lightning rods for attention. And I suppose the reason why I opened this little segment out by saying, what does this mean? What's going on? Kind of thing. It's not that I necessarily think it's the same three people in a van going around doing this,
No.
but rather, what do you suppose is the point of this sort of activity? In so much as there's no explicit message. No one seems to be protesting around these.
And nobody claims responsibility. Crucially.
Exactly.
Which,
cowardly in that sense. It's cowardly.
Well, you can take two points, two arguments, I think, on this. One is that it's an expression of frustration that your political view isn't being heard.
But what political view? That's my point. I have no idea.
Well,
exactly what these people think.
Well, the political view is there explicitly in the Karl Marx vandalism, and I think implicitly in the others.
Yes. Okay.
There is, of course, always the possibility that all of these things, all of these sites that have been attacked are, you could argue that in terms of the popular mood, what has been done is a desecration, in the sense that a site of religious observance could be desecrated, in the way that neo-Nazis smash up Jewish cemeteries and daub swastikas on Jewish graves. Now, we've not got that here, although there have been instances of that recently in France and in the UK, amongst others. But there's an implicit political message in attacking these particular sites. It's you could argue, for example, that attacking the Bomber Command Memorial and Churchill and so on, it will be more likely to be coming from the far left than the far right, unless it's done as a deliberate provocation. Just a false flag, whatever. But I don't want to go down that particular conspiracy theory hall of mirrors. It's pointless to try. And again, until the police actually arrest somebody and we find out why this was done, we're not going to know. But I think we also have to put it in context. Archaeologists, we have to take the long view, and if we're talking about a religious desecration, religious groups have always destroyed other people's monuments. from the Bamiyan Buddhas to the Byzantine iconoclasts to the
Banbury
Lutherans
Cross.
to the the Lutherans who whitewashed medieval murals in biblical murals in churches, and smashed up altars. It's what happens when people have a very strong world view that something standing there in 3 dimensions in a public space appears to contradict.
Yeah, that's true. But again, I would go back to the notion of it being cowardly. If I felt strongly enough about something to actively destroy a public monument, I would leave a poster. I'd do something to make it clear why that had been done. To leave it subtle, to have it so that various people can be blamed, may well be the intent, as you say. We don't quite know who to blame and how to blame them. Interestingly, though, and I know quite a lot was being made on, for example, the LBC radio station not that long ago about the Bomber Command Memorial, the footage supposedly of that act not being released publicly by the Met. And again, it just raises this sense of suspicion. You go, and maybe that's the point. Maybe these are acts that are designed to make people antsy, and as you say, it's striking out in that sense at symbols that behave now culturally in a way that's similar to going to a medieval city and nailing something to a church door, for example. It resonates. It's going to get attention.
Absolutely. And so I think just to wind up, this is a new challenge. If cultural objects like this are now seen as fair game by people with certain political views, and again, I'm not making any judgments about who these people are, because we haven't got the evidence. Hopefully, we will do sometime soon, but we haven't at the moment. It is a new challenge for museums and local authorities and people who curate public art and so on, because if this given the headlines that we've had here, sadly, we could expect, perhaps at least in the short term, more of this kind of heritage crime. I hope we don't, but people will have to factor that in now to their to the way they curate our public spaces.
Exactly, yeah, precisely. And presumably also they have to factor that into right from the when they start to commission a monument like this. It's going to be a factor in terms of ongoing maintenance and damage. So
and I think the point, and I think the point is as well in terms of Muppetry, and why I picked this as my Muppet of the Week, although it is a very serious story. Historically, this kind of rage and frustration actually doesn't achieve anything. All that will happen when they do get arrested and they get there'll be figures of hate on the front page of the tabloids and whatever. So they might make themselves feel better, but they ain't going to advance their cause.
No, exactly. Yeah. Not making friends and influencing people. That's for sure. No.